welcome to the CDS HKPASS debate. This is a friendly debate, and I think the first sort of interaction between these two great societies. CDS is the sort of like an intellectual society with a focus on Mainland China, and obviously HKPASS is very similar in that regard. And, it's a social services and public affairs society with a focus on Hong Kong. And just being two very intellectual societies, we decided to have a debate on an issue that sort of affects both Mainland China and Hong Kong very profoundly. So the general topic for today's debate will be one country, two systems. I would assume that everyone has at least heard of what one country, two systems is. It's basically the concept proposed by Chinese elder statesman Deng Xiaoping to Margaret Thatcher back in 1982. As a general principle that would facilitate the return of Hong Kong to the People's Republic of China in 1997 and provides a framework for the government of Hong Kong for at least 50 years afterwards. And this topic is quite a timely one because, as I'm sure all of our Hong Kong students will know, but probably our mainland friends would also know that last year there was a big event in Hong Kong called Occupy Central. Now that event itself is big, but it's not it's not the only issue itself. I think the broader issue is to do with one country, two systems. I think we all agree that one country, two systems is a very important issue for Hong Kong. But what we don't agree on is what exactly one country, two systems actually is. And there's a lot of controversy surrounding that. And on more sort of extremes, there are people arguing that whether one country, two systems should even continue or should even exist. So the organizing committee, Eric Lee from HKPASS, and Eric Lee from HKPASS, Eric the subcom for HKPASS, and David Wu, the subcom for CDS. And myself, Matthew Zhang, I'm the subcom of both. And so we, in organizing this debate, we came up with several propositions or several topics for this debate for our debaters to debate on. And ultimately, after a vote by the debaters themselves, we settled on this one. It is in Mainland China's own interest to continue the one country, two systems arrangement for Hong Kong after 2047. Just a bit of quick background about this proposition. This proposition was actually spoken by a statesman, a good friend of mine called Mr. George Yeo. For those of you who've been in Singapore, you might know him. He's the former foreign minister of Singapore, a good friend of mine. I interviewed him on my show last year, and we discussed this issue, and he made a statement which came to mind when I was proposing this debate. So today we have CDS representing the affirmative side, arguing that it is in China's interest to continue this arrangement after 2047, and we have on the other side we have HKPASS arguing for the negative. Now the format of the debate will be so each speaker, the first, second, and third speakers will each be allowed to speak for 3 minutes. There will be a knock of our timer. Eric will bang the table once at 3 minutes, and if you continue speaking after 10 seconds after that, you will individually bang the table. And the same arrangement goes for the last speaker, except the last speaker will be allowed to speak for 4 minutes instead of 3. And each team will be allowed one POI, one point of information, against each speaker of the other team. And now I'll hand over to Eric. Eric will give you a quick run through of the itinerary for tonight. Eric.
Once again, I would like to thank everyone here to come for our first ever debate between the two societies. So I will just briefly elaborate on the itinerary of today's debate. So first of all, the debate will run for approximately 40 minutes. After the debate, we will have our voting session. The voting session will be conducted by David Hu from CDS, and he will be in charge of taking the votes from the audience here, and he will also elaborate on the voting procedures. And during the voting process, hopefully we will have a judging panel to comment on the presentation from our debaters from both societies. And after the voting session, we will have open Q&A, also a comment session, which is open to the audience, and you guys can give comments about the presentation of the debaters tonight, and you guys can also comment on this debate motion and give your own opinion. And after this open Q&A session, we will have this socializing session between the two societies. We also prepare some refreshment for you guys, and we hope that this will be a bonding session between the two societies. Since so after so next, I would invite David Hu to elaborate on the matter of adjudication. David, please.
So first of all, thank you very much, everyone, for coming today, and it really is a pleasure being hosting this great event, this debate here. So I think Matthew and Eric has basically covered everything, so I'm just concentrate on the judging bit. So basically, how it's going to work is we've split into two parts. The first part is made up with us three, the organizing committee, and all the ex-con who's sitting in the first row here. And your vote will count for 50% of the final result. And all the subcommittee members, all the rest audience today, your vote will count for the remaining 50% because we're thinking, there will be more just subcom members than excom. So excom members' vote will carry more weight in the voting, and the vote is gonna carried out by secret ballot, and we just I will give you each one of you a piece of paper just to write your decision whether you think CDS or Hong Kong Pass is better during this debate, and we'll count out the result at the end. So that's it. I think hope you can enjoy the debate and the pass.
So just finally, before we start, let me just introduce our honorable debaters for tonight. So for the affirmative team CDS, our first speaker is Yang Yupei. How about I'll just introduce all and then we'll just clap, give them a big round of applause. The second speaker, Yang Peidi. The third speaker, Wu Yuanchao. The fourth speaker, Hua Jiang. The first speaker for the negative team, Hong Kong Pass, the first speaker, Cody Wang. The second speaker, Janice Leung. The third speaker, Raymond So. And unfortunately, the fourth speaker for Hong Kong Pass was sick this morning. He can't make it, so we'll have the first speaker, Cody Wang, do the concluding speech as well. So without further ado, let's invite. Round of applause for. Okay, now without.
Really good question. Are we allowed to reject POIs?
Okay, good question. Should we clarify that? Yes, you are allowed to reject POIs, but you have to take at least one.
Okay.
So yeah, so if they
entire team or just one person?
Entire team. So if when Cody speaks, your whole team is allowed to ask one POI. If he takes it, then that means if he rejects it, you can keep going until he takes it. He has to take one at least. Okay. So well, I guess we'll have the.
Just one more clarification. During the POI, the timer will be paused.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah. So time ready? Okay. So so let's welcome the first speaker from the affirmative team, Cody.
Wait.
Sorry. The affirmative team. Sorry.
Very good evening to everybody here present and my opponents stand for this motion is, it is not just in the interest of mainland China, but it is in the interest of both mainland China and Hong Kong to continue the system, one country, two systems after 2047. And the reason we say that is because we believe that change is only necessary if the current system is unsatisfactory and it's not working and it's no longer viable. But that is not the case in this current age. Let me elaborate on that. Since Hong Kong returned to China in 1997, the system, although not perfect, has largely been effective in achieving some of the original aims that it was meant to achieve when it was first drafted. And that aim is to make sure that when Hong Kong eventually returned to China, its role as an international financial center, its way of life, its political structure, its people, and its culture all stays the same, even though they are under a different country. And that, I am very happy to say, is still the case. Because the reason is, a lot of people feared that when Hong Kong returned to China, there was going to be a massive outflow of capital, and then people were not going to believe in Hong Kong anymore, and all international investors are going to escape from Hong Kong. But then, that is not the case, because today Hong Kong is still one of the most vibrant cities in the world, with a lot of investments going on, with very cosmopolitan society as well. So I think the system has been effective, and we should not change it. And then going forward, another question I want to address is, if the system is okay and we should not change it, so if we assume that we do want to change it after 2047, then is it feasible to do that in the first place? And my answer to that is, it is not feasible. And the reason for that is because if we look into the future, in 2047, by the time 2047 comes, which is about 40 years from now, the difference between mainland China and Hong Kong is still very significant. It is as significant as it is today. Economically, politically, socially, everything is very different. Economically, the data that we have right now is that the per capita GDP for Hong Kong right now is about 30,000 USD per person. But for mainland China is about 8,000 USD. And then going by the forecast that we have gathered, in about 40 years' time, Hong Kong's per capita GDP is going to increase to about 60,000 to 70,000. And then the mainland China's one is only going to increase to 30,000, which is not even the level that Hong Kong is right now. So the massive difference in terms of income and in terms of economic disparity is a reason strong enough for us to not want to change the system, to have the system right now. And lastly, one assumption that we
Can you have 10 more seconds just to
yeah, okay. So one assumption is China is not going to change in 40 years' time as well. So if everything is going to stay as it is right now, then we should not change the system. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder to our debaters, you do have to take one POI from the other teams.
So I have to...
Yeah, each speaker has to take one POI from the other team.
Okay.
So,
but it's okay because they have 3 members and we have 4. Okay.
Well, given that's the case, I believe then we'll just say no POI for the opening speaker. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So the negative team has said they're still open to that challenge of POI. So CDS, you have the benefit to challenge him on this one. Okay. So let's Okay. So let's welcome our first speaker from the negative team, Cody.
Okay, so the very fact that we have a debate between CDS and Hong Kong Pass illustrates why we should just stop one country, two systems in the first place. So, our team will basically structure our argument on 2 folds. First of all, we'll talk about the flaws and the weaknesses of one country, two system, and then we'll talk about a better alternative, which my second and third speakers will do. But before I move on to my substantive, I want to give a very quick rebuttal to the opposition. So their entire notion comes to the fact that Okay, because the situation will stay the same in 2047, we should not change the system because it's apparently working. Well, we think that that's a very flawed logic because that might work for Hong Kong, but that certainly doesn't work for China. And right now at this point, I would like to invite them to give me a POI and tell me directly how it is to China's interest right now and in 2047 of keeping one country, two systems. Please give me a POI, because you have not elaborated in your speech. Yes.
Okay, so honorable speaker from the opposition team, so you have challenged us, so this is our challenge. You have mentioned, so Hong Kong has long been incubated in this culture of democracy. How do you expect mainland China to absorb this huge population of people who are so used to democracy? How do you convert them into communists? That's the huge, political tension here.
Okay. Even if we assume that it's infeasible, that still doesn't mean that it's to our interests, right? Because you still may have negative interests of not trying to do this. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today. And by the way, they still haven't given us clear interests and positive benefits of keeping one country system to China. But we'll just keep that aside for now. So why is one country system weak? We think that there are two major reasons. First of all, it's pan-localism, and second of all is the intervention of foreign forces. So what do we mean by pan-localism? We think that recently in Hong Kong, there's been a rise of the cries for independence Hong Kong, for local Hong Kong, for the stronger Hong Kong culture. And we think that that's very harmful. And that roots directly to one country, two system. So what has one country, two system given us? They've given Hong Kong the freedom of speech. They've given Hong Kong the freedom of press. They've given Hong Kong the freedom of assembly. All of which are highly internationalized and publicized around the world. Let's take Occupy Central as an example. So it was quickly responded by echoes of support in Western countries where Chinese people around the world, or Hong Kong people more specifically, rose to call in echoing in support for Occupy Central. And we think that is very bad for China. Fundamentally because they shake up and they cause internal geopolitical conflicts that already exist, that will destabilize China and will subsequently harm their own interests. So why is stability so important, right? Because stability allows us, as China, to focus on economic development. Surely we have been staggering behind the entire Western world for the years of communist China. And that's why we're trying to catch up desperately. And without stability, ladies and gentlemen, there is no, I've already taken the POI, there is absolutely no way for economic development. So why does this shake up the geopolitical conflict? We look at examples of Xinjiang, we look at the examples of Tibet, all of which are crying for independence. And if you see Hong Kong crying for independence, and if we allow Western media to subsequently publicize this all over the world, especially when China right now has a strong social media, we think that this will send a very, very bad message to the Tibetan brothers that we should keep within our own boundaries. And that is the first part of our argument.
Sorry, before I call on the second speaker for the affirmative team, I just want to say that another ex-committee member from CDS, Austin, he has arrived late, but Austin, if you please sit on the first row because you will be as part of the panel session. Okay, yeah, of course. Okay, I'm ready. Okay, so now I'm calling the second speaker for the affirmative team.
Okay. So actually, with respect to his comment, I just want to argue something. So first of all, he did say that the benefit of the one country, two systems guarantees the freedom of press, freedom of expression, and the freedom of political rights. If you deny that, that's actually saying China is a dictatorship. So China is not a free country that it claims to be. Because since 2005, the whole international community is actually urging China to be a responsible stakeholder. So we should be more open-minded to those criticisms outside. Because if we just reject those criticisms, there is no place for us to grow. And also I just want to say something about you said stability actually. If there's no one country, two system that's going to let Hong Kong to keep its political system from the past,
Hong Kong is gonna be like Ireland, which means the People's Liberation Army has to deal with counterinsurgency warfare for like several decades. Okay, yeah. Just look at this Scotland and
Speak to the
oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, look at the Ireland. They've been go through like several decades of the warfare, and also the Malaya emergency in the 1950s. It was also because the British Empire suppressed the local people and denied their political rights. So that's why they actually go to the arms uprising. But China, I mean, Hong Kong is doing right now is actually only unarmed political expression, such as the Occupy Central system. This is just a political expression which is trying to influence the government to change something, to fulfill their demands, but without necessarily waging a bloodshed. So yeah, I have to say it is actually a very good system. And also it can be an experiment for Taiwan in the future if China wants to get Taiwan together. Just to sum up, basically if you deny the one country, two systems and its benefits, it's basically saying you deny the international norms of democracy and the human rights and liberties stuff. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now, okay, so I now call on the second speaker for the negative team, Janice.
Ladies and gentlemen, today Hong Kong PASS's stance is that it is not in mainland China's interest to continue the one country, two systems arrangement for Hong Kong after 2047. But before I begin with my own points, I would like to rebut some of our opponents' points. So, first of all, you have asserted that the freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly is good for Hong Kong. Yes, it is good for Hong Kong, but is it good for mainland China when it is most important to have stability in order to have economic development? What is more important, openness or stability? Sorry. So, on to my own point. Cody didn't finish his original argument. So, first of all, he did talk about colloquialism and how that would affect the internal stability of mainland China as a whole. But now we can talk about the impact of foreign forces in encouraging colloquialism and how that will in turn affect the internal instability that is already inherent in mainland China. So, because Hong Kong has free press and Western media coverage and freedom of speech, you all saw how Occupy Central blew up into an international phenomenon. You all saw how it became covered in media all over the world. And you saw how the West responded. They responded in favor of democracy, they responded in favor of liberalism, they responded with criticisms towards mainland China's kind of policies towards Hong Kong.
Okay, so I've mentioned that it's not in the interest of the mainland to allow democracy, to allow freedom of protest for Hong Kongers. But has mainland China actually intervened to suppress these protestants when they are protesting? It's not in the interest of the mainland Chinese government to interfere. So that's why last year it didn't.
Point of order. POIs are meant to be phrased as questions.
Okay. So how do you justify yourself that saying that intervention, the suppression, the open suppression of this democratic freedom is in mainland China's interest?
I never said that it was direct suppression of such political opponents. I'm saying that it is not in mainland China's own interest to portray itself as this kind of suppressor. So although it hasn't directly done anything, the principles behind its policies are reflected by the Western media as oppressive. Okay, so continue. So, as we all know, America probably doesn't want China to become dominant in East Asia because they want to stay in power. So, with this very large assumption in mind, okay, so if they don't want China to rise, how do they bring down China? How do they make China weaker? Well, for one, there's one very easy way to do it. It is to exploit what China already has. It is to exploit its inherent instability. It is to exploit Hong Kong's call for independence, or like more radical calls for independence, for Tibet calls for independence, and for Xinjiang calls for independence. So this will further fracture mainland China, probably. And so it is not in mainland China's interest to continue the one country, two systems after 2027. Which leads us to our next point, which Raymond will continue on. Which is that what other systems can we use apart from one country, two systems that will be better for Hong Kong and for China, most importantly for China in the future, and that is full assimilation of Hong Kong.
Now I call on the third speaker of the Burmese team,
First of all, I'd like to thank Janice for the opportunity to support us by mentioning that what alternatives better that's available for us to maintain the mainland China and Hong Kong relationship right here. And our answer is simply one country, two systems. That's the be all and end all. And I would like to address some of your points that raised that there. So first of all, it's very assumptuous and fallacious to assume that stability equals to good economic development. I tell you why. Because Reagan had once said that when the government cannot solve a problem, it's because itself is a problem. And our team would like to mention that behind China's rapid economic development, what's driving this economic development is population. It's purely because China has been so poor in the past that it has achieved so much by lifting so many people out of the poverty line. That's what has been done there. And economic research has shown that the productivity in China has not risen, while the productivity in Hong Kong has risen because of has risen more rapidly due to the mechanism of free market. And secondly, you have mentioned that the freedom of speech is something that's causing social instability for China. And our team would like to address that it's not true. You mentioned this US-Hong Kong conspiracy for Hong Kong's independence. If Hong Kong is being endowed with too much freedom to express its own expressions. But we would like to challenge you, if Hong Kong is absorbed into mainland, what will happen right here, as we have already mentioned, is within China you have this huge wave of destruction, of opponents, of anti-communist sentiments, movements. Look at Xinjiang, look at Tibet. That's what's happening in China. And we're not denying, it's definitely foreseeable that the only way for Hong Kong to separate itself from mainland China is for mainland China to absorb Hong Kong in the first place.
Sir?
Yes.
To clarify, we never said that we should have freedom of speech. Instead, we're saying we shouldn't, because by not having it, we'll become more stable. And isn't the examples that you're raising right now perfect examples of how freedom of speech leads to instability, which is one of the fundamental building blocks for economic growth?
The thing that I would like to address here is that how feasible it is to remove people of this freedom of speech while they've been so used to having that freedom of speech in the first place. And by denying people of that freedom of speech does not mean you can solve the problem, because they will definitely find other ways to express their dissatisfaction. And being an economics student at LSE, I will address the economic aspects of this argument as well. So Hong Kong has led mainland China in the economic race. So one of the perks of being Hong Kong, being semi-independent from mainland China, is that we, the Chinese mainland, can have one experiment field to test out its new financial instruments and policies. Look at the Hong Kong-Shanghai stock exchange mechanism right there. That's why mainland China, Shanghai, and London now is negotiating over a new establishment of this exchange. That's precisely why and how we have done this. It's because we have Hong Kong as a perfect test field for us to carry out new policies. And what's very infamous with mainland China is that the government officials are too often too cautious about economic innovations. That's why after it introduced national bonds, it has quickly abandoned it for 30 years, not restarting it until last year. So yeah, so economically speaking, I think it's in mainland China's interest as well. Thank you.
So from what, before I start the argument, first, the original there said the democracy is deep-rooted in Hong Kong is completely wrong. It's quite the opposite. Although democracy seems to be in Hong Kong, there are not genuine elections. Hong Kong is kind of following the China style of elections, so democracy is not that deep-rooted. So entire change to China system is much more workable. The second point is the argument of your side crucially depends on the assumption that China would not change at least until 2047. But we always question that assumption because what if China starts to become more democratic? You can't be that pessimistic about China. So let's start my argument. So my argument is more economic. So basically, if we abandon the system of one country to the policy of one country two systems, I think it would be easier for China in terms of economics, because right now, as have been for many years, China wants to internationalize its currency, the RMB, and our position is very clear. If Hong Kong is fully incorporated into China, then China has a much stronger control or influence in Hong Kong as a test field for its implementation of the internationalization of RMB. And and trade benefits as well, because under the existing framework of one country two system, framework allows quite a lot of independence, quite a lot of flexibility to Hong Kong to do their own deals. Well, our argument is if we stop the system, we can bring those benefits back to China instead of share it with the Hong Kong residents. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So actually, I have two questions very quickly. Yeah. So first of all, I think you guys contradict yourselves, because I think the other speaker, he said actually the China does not want democracy and freedom of political rights, and then you said we should not be very pessimistic about China because China might become a democracy in the future.
I'm not saying it must.
Point of order. The speaker asking, please rephrase your.
Okay, as a question. Okay, actually, as my second question is that is it really a new system? Because it actually seems like you are just suggesting that Hong Kong is going to be like China, so that's not an alternative system though. And also, as you said, share the stuff like drag the stuff from Hong Kong into China, do not share to Hong Kong anymore. I think that's actually putting Hong Kong in the second place as a.
Well, the question here is about whether it is in mainland China's interest. It's private about mainland China, not private about Hong Kong.
I think communist regime that you have to care about every.
Well, we care about them, but the main question is about China.
Point of order.
You have to focus on the question.
Okay. Sorry. Before we go on, I have to remind the debaters that POI is not an occasion for back and forth exchange between debaters on both sides. The speaker asking the POI has to ask a simple question in the form of a question, and the debater will have to answer and then move on.
Answer the question? Yeah. So basically our argument is economic, as I said just now, because the policy, the project of the internationalization of RMB is a prime one, it's a big one in China, and if China managed to incorporate Hong Kong fully, politically and socially into China's political system, then the policy is much more feasible. Yeah, that's my argument. Thank you.
Before I commence my main argument, I would like to address certain things mentioned by my dear opponents. That is, firstly, that the argument that stability is good for economic growth, and China proved that is simply nonsense. Why am I saying that? Thousands of countries in this world that is dictatorship, that is stable. North Korea, Congo, you got Central African Republic, you got thousands of dictatorships around the world that doesn't prove economic growth. China is just an exception, and that exception is not.
We never said that stability equals economic growth. All we're saying is stability is a requirement for economic growth. Other factors included. Maybe North Korea doesn't have what China has.
not the one country, two system itself that caused the instability. You have China's officials occasionally making comments like a separation of power doesn't exist in Hong Kong. You have Xi Jinping mentioned that power should cooperate with Hong Kong, consistently undermining this system. That is the root cause of this frustration in the first place. And before 2011, when China really respects that Hong Kong people patriotic, 51% like China, want to become like China in 2008. People in Hong Kong want to have Zhu Rongji to become the chief executive after the Dongxian law was removed. So this is simply the intrusion. And thirdly, why one country, two system is good for Hong Kong in the long run?
Well, your team has already asked about that.
In the long run, is because this is the most pragmatic thing to do. The political wisdom of Deng Xiaoping is that he is pragmatic. He understands what is the best for Hong Kong, for China in the long run, is to settle in a one country, two system, accommodating the differences while maximizing the benefit on the both sides. If we do not allow such a system to continue, there is simply no alternative. You observe in China, the consequences will be something like Scotland, Northern Ireland, where you have independent sentiment, where you hold referendum that is wasting of money, that is wasting of time, wasting polarizing opinion, and in the end achieve nothing. And in fact, the one country system serves as a means to channeling some of these autonomous sentiments and preventing outright expression of independence in the first place. And lastly, I want to mention this important fact. According to Martin Checker, China is a civilizational state. And what is truly exceptional about this civilizational state is its ability to accommodate different political systems under a same political entity. That is not unprecedented in the history of the world. And the fact that one country, two systems is a perfect demonstration of China's uniqueness and China's exceptional as an international power. And if China wants to become more powerful in the future, that is what China must do. And that will be highly beneficial for China and for Hong Kong. Okay, that will be it.
Thank you for that very passionate speech. Actually, you remind me of the leader of opposition in Singapore. What's his name? Exactly. Anyways, now we'll have the fourth speaker and also the first speaker as well of the negative team, Cody Wang, to conclude the case for his team.
So as the concluding speaker of the opposition team, I want to quickly summarize the team's stances and the main arguments, and most importantly, why opposition has totally claimed this debate. To start with, proposition gave us a picture which is very conflicting. On one hand, they want to have a high degree of freedom, but then also have stability and growth. We'll dissect that later. But on the opposition side, we think that for the sake of economic growth, we are willing to sacrifice certain autonomies until economic growth is on track. This may not happen in 50 years. This may happen for a longer period of time. We don't know. But for now, we know that it is not on track. So, on the proposition side, they have raised three major arguments. Firstly, it's the benefits of Hong Kong of keeping one country, two system. Secondly, of having no alternative, and therefore we have to have one country, two systems. And thirdly, that China should be more open. Now, dealing with these arguments one by one. First of all, the benefits of Hong Kong. We think that that's unimportant because they never linked how benefiting Hong Kong will necessarily benefit mainland China. We think there's no link, essentially. We think that we can totally benefit at the harms of Hong Kong, and we're willing to do that for the nation's interest. And we think that this argument is pretty much failed. The second argument is the no alternative argument, which we also think is very much flawed. Because we propose a very, very, very simple argument, which is at the end of Janice's speech. Assimilation, or to fit these words, one country, one system. And we think that assimilation will necessarily bring benefits to, most importantly, China, and maybe some spillover effects to Hong Kong. The third argument is whether China should be more open or not. And I want to spend some time at the end of my speech to deal with this problem, because this is a very complicated problem. Instead, I want to focus on what we have brought on the table. We think that we brought two major arguments with three major subpoints. So the first major argument is the weakness of the one country, two system policy. We think the weakness comes from pan-local freedom of press. When you have the freedom of assembly, it's much easier for foreign forces to intervene because there is that freedom right there. It's much easier to destabilize Hong Kong and subsequently destabilize China. The second argument we proposed is the alternative, the better alternative, which is one country, one system. And we think that this is a better system because, most importantly, politically and socially, it will bring better unity in terms of politics. It will bring better unity in terms of identity. It will unite and whip the entire nation's identity into one, giving Tibetans, giving Uyghurs who live in Xinjiang, and even Taiwan to some extent, no excuse but to submit to our one national identity, which is very important to continuing our economic growth. Yes.
Okay, so basically, I have a quick question.
Yes.
I just want to add one quick comment. I think
Okay.
what you said was basically a Soviet system that wanted to observe all the races. Basically, they failed. And secondly, you always mention about the freedom and the stability. Those are not compromised. They can all coexist together. And so my question, question is that, what exactly is your alternative? Because it seems like your alternative is only care about the Chinese people, but our standing point is, we are seeing that is mutually beneficial for Hong Kong and Mainland China.
Our alternative is very simple. One country, one system is as simple as making China the same status as Shenzhen. There is no more chief executive. There is no more legislative council. As controversial as that seems, it is very beneficial. And if you think China is that far from the USSR right now, it might be, but we still don't think it's necessarily that close to democracy. We don't think democracy is necessarily a good thing for China at the moment. And I want to further elaborate on this, which is a direct response to whether China should be more open. So, few questions. Why did China never, ever apologize to the June 4th incident? Why don't we have democracy in China? Why don't we have free press in China? Why don't we have more political parties and a legislative system that actually works? If you answer these questions, just as I think the most important thing to think of is, what does the Chinese government think in terms of China's interests? Why doesn't the Chinese government step up, own their game, and apologize to the June 4th incident, and say that yes, we have killed innocent students for having an uprising against us? And the most important thing behind all of this is because China knows that if it apologizes to these things, it will open up a very bad threshold. A very bad threshold for further foreign intervention, a very bad threshold for political destabilization. Ladies and gentlemen, as bad as it sounds, we have to accept one fundamental fact, which is we need the Communist Party right now to have economic growth. And without the Communist Party, we will have never had economic growth. We are still a developing nation, and that's why we should abolish one country, two systems.
Firstly, thank you very much to all the debaters on both sides for your participation. Given that it's an opportunity debate and didn't have much time to prepare, I think all of you did a very good job. I should all be very, very proud of yourself. And now, may I just get David onto the stage as he's the voting manager for this debate and he'll run the voting procedure. So, David.
Which hasn't really got a kind of weighted vote this time. It's 5 votes for affirmative, which is yes debaters, and negative, 9 votes for negative, which is so overall, the final result is 27.9%